Hey guys, welcome to Planet Mithril. My name is Mithril and I'm finally finishing off my revisiting and revitalising of the three hunters, Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli, in time for the new edition by finishing off with Gimli, Son of Gloin in his plastic three hunters sculpt from Games Workshop. Yes, that's right, by the time this video is finished, you'll have a trio of epic, awesomely painted models to wreak havoc across the armies of Mordor, Isengard or Moria, or anyone else who decides to stand in their way. Now, Gimli sculpts have always been very angular, very rigid, and almost kind of blocky. This reflects the dwarven iconography from the films, lots of harsh lines, lots of very angular motifs. So I'll be adopting a slightly more rigid paint style to try and bring out his character as much as I can to best reflect how he is in the films. I'll be working my Gimli off a black undercoat which I've applied using Citadel Chaos Black Spray after cleaning and assembling my model.
Let them come. There's one dwarf left on the channel who still has no paint.
Brushes ready, guys. Let's get painting. I'm starting by base coating Gimli's face using Bugman's Glow. His long, cascading beard and the braid down his back I'm base coating now using Doomball Brown. Gimli is made up predominantly of reds and metals. Balancing all these reds can be daunting, much like the greens on Legolas. The main body of his tunic is getting a base coat with a 3-to-1 mix of Mephiston red and Dryad bark. This also includes the fingers of the gloves. All the leathers now I'm painting using Rhinox hide. This includes the boots, gloves, belts, straps, and the inner segments within the helm. All the axe shafts I'm base coating now using Corn Red. All the axes. Seriously. There's about 100 axes. The Elven Cloak now I'm base coating with my usual unorthodox method with a 1-to-1 mix of Abaddon Black and Zemeti Desert. Loving that beautiful camo-like green. All the silver works now I'm base coating using lead belger. Any and all chainmail, axe heads, helmet structure, and any other details you'd feel will benefit from a quick hit of silver. The golds we'll be picking out later on. I'm quickly hitting the exposed face with a shade using Reikland Flesh Shade. There's not an awful lot of exposed flesh on Gimli, so you won't need to spend a super long time defining this. I'm relayering over with a 1-to-1 mix of Cadian flesh tone and Bugman's glow, leaving the flesh shade showing in the recesses as best I can. Further defining this with a layer using pure Cadian flesh tone, trying my best to further define the nose and the slightly saggy bags under his eyes and framing his dwarven features. Starting to add Kislev flesh into the Cadian flesh tone and a rough 3-to-1 ratio for the final highlights, keeping these tighter than I normally do, as I don't want his overall skin to look too pale or light. You can push this further if you wish, but I urge to keep more on the minimal side of things. The eye recesses I'm picking out using Abaddon Black. And finishing off, as always, using padded witch flesh. And there's an awful lot of texture and definition within Gimli's beard. It makes up a considerable part of the model. Dwarves, am I right? So it's important I get a tone that really matches how he's portrayed in the films and doesn't get lost within all the other reds I'll be using on the model later on. I'm starting by shading the entire beard and the braid with Agrak Surfshade. This will tone the recesses without dulling the orangey tones which are present in the Doomball Brown. Once my shade is thoroughly dry, I'm layering up the beard with a 1-to-1 mix of Doomball Brown and Scrag Brown. The Scrag will heighten those gingery orangey tones already present, and now I'm focusing on creating some initial definition over the very well detailed flow of hair. I'm building this up to an initial highlight using pure Scrag Brown. Now the texture of the hair is different over the surface. The moustache area and braids require slightly less fine application given their bigger clumps of hair, whereas the lower, more wispier parts of the beard and hair require more precise application to create a natural sense of movement throughout the hair itself. For the successive highlights, I'm going to be adding increasing amounts of Screaming Skull into the mix. Gradually, starting at a rough 2-to-1 ratio, this will help give the hair a tone that will stand out against the very red rest of the model, and holds true to his iconic character's look from the film. You can add as much or as little Screaming Skull for the successive highlights as you wish, depending on how bright you want this to be overall. When you're happy with how your hair is looking, it's time to apply a glaze with some heavily diluted Cassandra yellow to help tie together all the layer and highlight stages and further reinforcing a realistic tone to the hair and beard. See how much of Gimli's character is already starting to shine through just from getting that beard and the face done? I'm going to be starting all the clothing and leathers uniformly by applying a shade with Carroburg Crimson. I would normally pump for Agrak Surfshade over the leathers, but Carroburg is dark enough to shade these and subtly helps to tie them into the red on the tunic. With this thoroughly dry now, I'm applying a blocking layer to the reds using Wisdagger Red. Now again, as Gimli's sculpt is quite closed, axes covering clothing, big old beard in the way, there isn't actually an awful lot of exposed tunic to cover. The hem of the tunic has a different texture strip, which I'm just stippling the Wisdagger onto. This will create a unique and different texture against the rest of the tunic. continuing to build up the definition and layers over the tunic and fingers using a 1-to-1 mix of White Stacker Red and Deathclaw Brown. Now I don't want this tunic to be super rosy or vibrant red. They're not in the film, and I'm saving this slightly more for the spot colour of the axe shafts in a moment. You can see how I'm just reinforcing the texture and flow of the material over Gimli as I build up these layers. For the highlight stages, I'm adding gradual amounts of Kislev flesh into the mix. I must stress gradually here, as too much too soon will overbalance and desaturate the red tones, and then you'll lose all realism within the material itself. I'm going to bring back a little bit of warmth to the tunic and fingers now by applying a heavily diluted glaze of Fuegan Orange. The axe shafts I'm now working on by defining the harsh, sharper edges and corners with a 1-to-1 mix of Corn Red and Evil Sun Scarlet. You can see how I'm trying to be as precise as possible here, as I really want to capture the angular, blocky feel of Dwarven culture. I'm also carefully tracing in a freehand wrapped pattern down the length of the axe on its back and the one he's brandishing for a little bit of extra texture, but this is purely optional. Following up with an extreme edge highlight, going over all these areas once again, but this time using Evil Sun Scarlet. This is a super bright paint and will really make those axe shafts pop against the rest of the miniature. The more precise its application, the sharper and more dangerous Gimli's axes will look overall. With my browns and leathers already shaded, I'm going to layer them up now with a 1-to-1 mix of Rhinox hide and Gorthor brown. Again, accentuating that blocky, angular look of Gimli's garb with harsher, stronger line work over as many areas as I can. Framing the shapes of the gloves and boots, and carefully applying a freehand concentric circle design to the inner area of the helm. Yes, because I'm just that extra. A following highlight is now being applied to the browns and leathers using pure Gorthor brown. The trousers are getting a quick base coat using a 1-to-1 mix of Skaven Black Dinge and Abaddon Black. followed by a highlight using pure Skaven Black Dinge. Again, there's not a lot of material here and it's fairly well shadowed, so this will be enough just to pick these areas out. Now, you've probably already seen it twice if you're doing Gimli last, you've seen it on Aragorn, you've seen it on Legolas, but I'm going to go through again my unorthodox Elven Cloak recipe because it just feels rude to leave Gimli out at this stage. An initial shade is being applied to the cloak using diluted Athonian Camo Shade. There are a lot less defined folds over Gimli's cloak compared to his hunting partners, so be careful not to leave any sitting on the larger, flatter surfaces as it dries. I'm building up the camo green look of the Elven Cloak now by increasing the amount of Zemesi Desert in the original base coat mix to a rough 3:1 ratio split in favour of Zemesi, blocking out the larger curves and blockier, flatter areas of cloak here, leaving the shade showing in the recessed folds and where the axe presses against his back. I'm adding small amounts of Screaming Skull into the previous layer mix as I begin building up the initial highlights, creating some flow and texture over the movement of the cloak. You can see how I'm working this up gradually and allowing the previous layers to do their work, progressing the transition from the shaded, darker areas of cloth through to the upper curves. Continuing again to increase the amount of Screaming Skull in the mix gradually until I have a rough 1:1 mix of Screaming Skull and the previous layer mix. You can add more or less Screaming Skull depending on how bright and desaturated you want the upper highlights to end up, but if you're painting Gimli last, I would strongly suggest using Aragorn and Legolas as a reference, as you want them to maintain coherency between the look of the three of them. All of the silver now is getting a thorough shade using Nuln Oil, working this into the recesses of the chainmail and letting this tone down the vibrancy of the lead belcher. Once this is dried and the silvers are shaded to my liking, I'm going to edge highlight all these now using Ironbreaker. Super fine lines here will really give the sense of light bouncing off these reflective surfaces. The remaining metallic details I'm picking out using Balthasar Gold. These areas include the ringlets and rivets down the axe shafts, the front emblem on his helmet, centre workings of the double-headed axe, pauldrons, and anywhere else you think might benefit from a flashy hint of gold. I'm bringing a hint of warmth and slightly more burnished look to the golds by hitting them with a slightly diluted shade of Drewtry Violet just before getting to the next shading stage. With this dry, I'm applying a second shade now to tone all the golds down using Agrak's Earthshade. An edge highlight is now being applied using Auric Armor Gold.
Very dangerous over short distances.
There you have it. The final member of the Three Hunters is finished and ready for the new edition, marching to war alongside his counterparts Aragorn and Legolas, and ready to wreak havoc in the lines of Uruks, Orcs and Goblins alike. For basing tips, please be sure to check out my 5-minute basis playlist. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell for notifications of when I upload videos. And until next time, as always, take care and happy hobbying. Bye guys.